When you're talking about statistics, I mean, part of me is a little bit of an entertainer, and let's be honest, statistics is a relatively drab topic, or can be. And I was trying to figure out if there's a way I could add a little excitement or a little pizzazz to my presentation.
Welcome back to the next episode of Insights by Design. We're thrilled to be joined by Josh Starmer. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
We're thrilled that you're here, and I appreciate you taking the time. For those who aren't familiar with you, Josh, would you mind just doing a quick introduction?
Yeah, my name's Josh Starmer. I have a YouTube channel called StatQuest with Josh Starmer, and my YouTube channel focuses on teaching data science, machine learning, and statistics topics. And what I like to pride myself on is I try to teach things as simply as possible, with as little mathematical notation as possible. I still use it when it's needed, but I try to make it simple and easy to follow and very visual, without losing any of the mathematical rigor.
And being the former lead AI educator at Lightning AI, educating millions with StatQuest, and then doing a world tour, you've never, as you mentioned earlier off camera, you've never taught a class at UNC despite being an assistant professor there.
Yeah, that's a thing a lot of people get confused by. I which I think is reasonable. So I started working at UNC a long time ago as a postdoc. I got a PhD in something called bioinformatics, which is basically statistics applied to biological data, or genetics specifically. And I got a postdoc there, and the postdoc was wonderful, and I didn't want to go anywhere, and I loved working there. And the postdoc was a research postdoc, so I was doing a lot of research. I was trying to develop new methods for analyzing biological data sets. And but after a certain while, you can only be a postdoc for so long, and so after that time limit expires, whoever hired you as a postdoc, at least in this situation, has the option of continuing to pay your salary, if you want to stay working there. And the title they give you at that point is called research assistant professor, and you're funded entirely by somebody else. I was funded entirely by Terry Magnuson, who was an incredibly great boss, and he was actually one of the reasons why StatQuest exists. And he's been a mentor for me, and he's also been he's encouraged me at every step of the way. And up until the day, it's funny, we joke about this, and that one of the best things he did for me ever was he fired me ultimately. And the reason why he fired me is he knew that I needed to do StatQuest full time. And he gave me that opportunity, but he also gave me that push. And we get together for dinner every Saturday. And we still joke about it and have a great time. And it's kind of cool. He's like my dad in a way. He's really proud of me for being as successful as I have been with my channel, and how he feels like he's had a little bit of a part of that success by getting me to take it seriously and make it a full-time job.
And just to clarify, UNC is the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It's basically the Harvard of the Mid-Atlantic states, or Harvard is basically the UNC of New England.
Exactly.
And so for our listeners who are normal, who live outside of academia, UNC is a top flight research institution where a lot of innovations come out of, including StatQuest.
That's right. So my early videos, really early videos, I wrote them, or I created them for my coworkers in the genetics lab. And at the very beginning, I used to say, "This StatQuest is brought to you by the friendly folks in the genetics department at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill," because I was still, a full-time employee there, and I was making it specific. All my early examples as data were like based on mice, because I was in a mouse genetics lab and genetics data, because I wanted to make them for my coworkers, and just so happened other people watched them as well.
And your origin story of starting your YouTube channel for your coworkers, it happens to be incredibly effective and it grows. You're famous, or maybe infamous, for making your videos and a whole book using just Keynote.
That's true. I do everything in Keynote.
Despite your growth,
Yeah.
staying in Keynote, what is your advice for maybe new creators who are too focused or focused hard on technology and trying to get the best and greatest technology while you've been able to keep things simple?
Yeah. Well, when I started StatQuest, I was, like I said, I was still at UNC and I had a laptop and nothing fancy. Right now, I got this really fancy microphone, which is awesome. But back in the day, I didn't have a fancy microphone. I just had the built-in microphone on my laptop, and I recorded one of my most famous, or I don't know if it's famous, but it's my most viewed video. It's a video on something called principal component analysis, and it's been viewed over 2 million times. And I recorded it in one of those study rooms in the library, using the built-in microphone on the laptop, and I think I did that one in Keynote. I had recently switched from PowerPoint because PowerPoint at the time was crashing a lot on my computer, and it was kind of frustrating me. So I didn't want to leave PowerPoint because I was really comfortable with how to use it, but I was like, I've just got to try this Keynote thing and see if it works. So I switched, and and the thing about Keynote is if you have a Macintosh computer, it's free. So I used the free software. I used Keynote and I use iMovie. Both of those are free to make the video, and I used the built-in microphone that came with the laptop. So really, if the only expense I had was the laptop, which I'd actually had for about 4 years before. So it was an old crummy laptop, and yeah, with that I made the video that's been viewed more than anything else on my channel, and it was low tech, didn't cost me anything, and and it's hugely successful relative to, I don't know, some other videos I've made. Um, and so to me, that's always spoken. What that means to me is that it's the content, it's the message, and it's rather than the style of the presentation, I guess. I mean, there is some style. People, I'm myself. I try to be myself as much as possible. So I add little jokes because I like things to be a little on the silly side. And I sing songs in my videos, but it's all just me rather than trying to have the best production, I guess. And I've found that to be pretty successful, and that rather than, I don't know. I mean, I could make it look fancier if I wanted to, but I'd rather just focus on the message.
So originally, StatQuest was for your colleagues at UNC, which is a very well-defined audience. But once you
Yes.
go global, it's a lot harder sometimes to understand who your audience is. How do you stay in touch with the people who are viewing StatQuest and how do you connect your knowledge with what they want and need?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One thing that's helpful are people often put comments about what they want me to cover in the comments, or they'll email me, and so I get a lot of feedback that way. But I've recently started doing a lot more sort of public speaking. I was at the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana last week, and earlier this week I was at UNC Chapel Hill because I could walk there. Um, and I've been getting out a little bit and meeting people and talking to them about what they're doing. I also started a podcast called the Human Stories in AI, and part of that is for me to learn what people are doing and how they're doing it, so that I can get a sense of sort of what's hot and what people need to know. But it's interesting that you mentioned, though, because that has been a little bit of a problem for me, and that um, when I was at UNC, it was very clear what I should make videos about. and I also had a lot of technical experience, like firsthand experience using those methods. Like I would do a stat quest on, like, for example, the principal component stat quest. I was using principal component analysis every day at my job. And so I learned a lot of like what the nuance is and things like that. I had a lot of experience with it and I could speak from that. But once I left the lab, it became, I had a lot of momentum and I had a lot of things I wanted to cover. But over time, I felt very kind of separated from both what people needed to learn about and also personally, I wasn't getting as much personal experience using these methods. And so I've been trying to rectify both those things with the podcast, and I'm now teaching some workshops on how to code neural networks, and so I'm trying to deal with both those things. But that has been a problem that I've wanted to address is how to really know what, because if you just listen to what people say and ask for, it's not always what they need. And so I need to make sure I'm not being kind of like tricked by, because people might say they need, something that's really flashy and new, but what they really need is just a t-test, that kind of thing. And so I've been trying to sort of make sure, double check that what I hear people saying they need is what they really need, plus making sure I get some more hands-on experience with things.
Yeah, and I imagine that social desirability bias comes into play sometimes with YouTube comments or other sorts of direct feedback, because every once in a while I need to go back and just look up, what is an alpha level again, and what level do I actually need for this project, and how do I know, and how do I argue it? Sometimes it's embarrassing to ask those basic questions, but there's a lot of power in asking basic questions and getting good answers. All of us need refreshers from time to time, even if we're experts in the field.
Yeah.
But we also wanted to ask you about your cellos. Our viewers can see that there's at least 2 cellos back there, maybe a guitar or a banjo or something on the floor. Yeah. You're known for recording jingles about statistics and even full songs, which not everyone on the internet does. It's mostly cat videos in my feed. How has music helped you with your career?
I love music, and I actually wanted to be a professional cello player when I was younger, and I studied for that. And so I'm actually a pretty good cello player, and I love the instrument. I love playing it. It has led to me starting all my videos though because I love music, and I have to sing. You can't stop me. It has led me to starting all my videos with what I call a silly song, which is usually something that I improvise right on the spot. And for me, it's a way of like celebrating the end of recording a video, because making a video can sometimes take months of research, and then recording and editing and putting it all together. And the way I sort of cap it off is I record a silly song as the very last thing I do. And it's a nice way for me to kind of like be like, oh, this is, we're done. And but what I've found out in a happy way is that a lot of people for the silly song actually serves as sort of like as something that makes them more relaxed and less stressed out. I think a lot of people, when they watch my videos, they've got a big test the next day, or they've got something very soon where they're going to have to know this stuff cold, an interview question or something like that. And so they're kind of stressed out. And then they bring up my video and they're all like, ah, and then I go, the log of base E is for you and for me. And they're like, oh, I got it. And it just relaxes them. And once they're relaxed, they can, you're in a better condition to learn. You're in a better mindset. And so I actually think it's got like a pedagogical virtue to it, which is just makes me happy, because that means I get to do it even more.
Your jingles are famous, and I know that one of my favorites was your neural network jingle where you're like, it's not so hard, it's not scary.
Yeah.
How has creativity helped you in your career?
I mean, I think in general, creativity is, um, for me, it's seeing what other people haven't done or seeing what people haven't said. It's I look for gaps. So when for example, with neural networks, I remember somebody asked me if I could do a video in neural networks, and I wrote him back and I said, why don't you watch these videos on neural networks? And I gave them the playlist that Three Blue One Brown created, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I was like, I mean, problem solved right there, bam. And they wrote back and they said, oh, we've seen those videos before, but and they didn't say I could do it better, but they just said, I think I think there's something for you to say. I think it'd be good if you had something to say about them. And so I watched Three Blue One Brown's videos a couple times, and they're awesome. I love them, but I after a couple of viewings, I realized that there's some things he doesn't talk about, and that's not a criticism, because no, you can't talk about everything all the time, right? Otherwise, that video would have been like 6 years long, right? Each episode would be 6 years long. It's so he focused on certain things and then left out other things as just a necessity of the things that he wanted to focus on. And so I watched that and go, well, he's not talking about these other things, so I'll focus on these other things. And I feel like part of creativity is the ability to recognize that there are these empty spaces that could be filled. And so that was cool. The other part is for me is trying to figure out how to illustrate things. I like having in my videos, I like having drawings or illustrations of all the things, all the techniques and all the algorithms. And so that is also a very creative process of looking at an equation and going, how can I turn that into a picture? Is there some sort of geometric representation that is faithful to what the mathematics is really doing? And so that's another aspect of creativity that I take a little bit of pride in, are those two things. One is seeing empty spaces that could be filled with new stuff, and two, realizing that a lot of this stuff can be visualized in ways that maybe it hasn't been visualized before.
So you've said before, Josh, that you're sometimes only 2 videos ahead of your audience. What are some of your go-to resources to upskill?
Oh my gosh. That's a great question. And it's also very true. I'm only 1 or 2 videos, or it might be the video I'm working on right now. I'm learning whatever the topic is, and then writing about it or making a video about it. What do I like to do? I know this sounds impossible, but I'm a big fan of the original manuscripts of whatever it is I'm focusing on. Sometimes those things are impenetrable, and you'll never understand it. But more often than I would expect, they're actually very clearly written. They're not illustrated. Oftentimes they don't have pictures, but the descriptions they have and the written descriptions they provide, and some of the pictures, you can figure things out from it. So I'm a big fan of going all the way back to whatever the original source material was, and at least skimming through it. And I do it for a couple of reasons, right? One is just a reality check, because there's all these other things, like, for example, like transformer neural networks. There's a billion tutorials on how transformer neural networks work. But how do you know they're actually correct? I don't know. So I go back to the original manuscript, the one that came out in 2017, and I read it and I go, well, it's all right here. So that's a big thing for me, are the original manuscripts. I've got favorite books as well. I'm a big fan of the Introduction to Statistical Learning in R. I believe it's a free PDF download. It's an amazing resource, and I'm a big fan of that. Penn State, I believe, has an excellent statistics website. as does this US. There's a thing at UCLA that also has a really excellent statistics websites, and those are some of my favorites that I, when I see the Google search come back and there's something at this UCLA site or there's something at Penn State, I kind of perk up and go, oh goody, I'm going to be able to understand this.
When you say you go back to the original manuscripts, are these typically scientific papers on the cutting edge of their field at the time?
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, yeah, whatever the original sort of publication was that introduced the world to whatever the new technique is. I had to do that for, when I learned, XG boost, all the boosting things. If it's got boosting in the name, the way I learned about it was from the original manuscripts that were published to introduce the world to whatever that technique was. Add a boost, gradient boost, all those things. They have the algorithms sort of outlined in the manuscripts, and I can just kind of go through them step at a time, and make sure that I understand what's going on.
Yeah, that's such important work because so many good ideas die in academic and scientific journals because a lot of smart people on the cutting edge aren't very good public communicators and aren't very good teachers. And a lot of people who are good public communicators and teachers don't always look at the journals at all, or sometimes they don't have the expertise to know how to understand and apply it. And so I applaud you for doing that important work of bridging those two worlds.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
And Josh, you're known for taking these complex concepts that are sometimes unapproachable and making them simple through beloved characters such as Stat Squatch and Normalsaurus, but also through your trademark BAM, double BAM, and the astonishing and not often used triple BAM.
I know it's true.
What's the origin story of the BAM?
So, when you're talking about statistics, I mean, part of me is a little bit of an entertainer, and let's be honest, statistics is a relatively drab topic, or can be. And I was trying to figure out if there's a way I could add a little excitement or, a little pizzazz to my presentation. And when I was a kid, there was a guy on the Food Network called Emeril Lagasse, who's a chef based in New Orleans, and he had a cooking show, and that blew my mind because up until then, when I was a little kid, cooking shows were all on PBS, and it was just like someone in a studio kitchen cooking something, and it was great. They you could learn a lot, and it was very educational, and I like to eat and I like to cook, and so I always liked watching those shows. But Emeril did it with style. He had a live jazz band. It was just like watching the Tonight Show, except it was a cooking show. He had a live jazz band. And so that would pump up the audience, and so the audience is like, yeah, cooking, yeah, food, yeah, let's do it. And so I'm like, man, I got to do that for stats. How do I get people going? Stats, yeah, let's do it. I couldn't do the live jazz band. But the other thing that Emeril did is whenever he'd add some spice or seasoning or whatever he was cooking, he would go bam. And I was like, yeah, that's what you do. It punctuates, it brings people's attention, it focuses people. And so I started saying bam. As a way to, it's almost a way to to indicate that we're at the end of a chapter, when we finally understood a major concept. I want to highlight that, and the way I highlight it is I say bam, and that's, and I go up to triple bam, and so what that does is it restricts me to 3 main ideas per video. Which I feel like is a good number. I've actually wanted to go to the quadruple BAM a couple of times, but when I do that, what I feel like what I'm doing is I'm trying to stuff too much information down somebody's head at once, and that what I really need to do is pare it down to just 3 major concepts, and anything more is probably too much. It's too much for me, at least. And so it's become a way for me to sort of self-correct and make sure that I'm not trying to explain too many concepts in one video.
And having restraints and constraints can often foster creativity. Last week we met with Aurélien Vautier, who creates amazing data visualizations and puts constraints on himself regarding size, and he's only allowed to use one color, and he can only have so many numbers of lines.
Oh, wow.
In what other situations have constraints maybe helped you be more creative?
Um, well, one thing it's interesting is just making YouTube videos as opposed to doing in-person presentations made me radically change my style. Um, when I was still a researcher at UNC, the standard practice then was to do like a PowerPoint presentation of your research and to put up a slide that shows all your data, like from 10 different experiments. And you'd use a laser pointer to point out things that you think are important and that let's talk about this data set or this thing. And you're using a laser pointer and you're pointing at different things. And I remember when I was starting to make presentations for YouTube, I kind of panicked because I was like, I don't have a laser pointer. How do I focus people's attention on any specific thing? And then I realized that what I should do is just have one thing on the screen. I don't need to have 10 things on the screen. I can just have one. I can have the one thing that I want to talk about. And everything else just it gets in the way, is actually distracting. And that was a real profound realization for me that the way I had been presenting before was actually a pretty bad way to present. Even in person, it's not a great way to have a screen full of stuff and assume that people are looking where you want them to look. Because chances are, at least I discovered with myself, because I get bored really quickly or I get distracted really easily. And what I would do is when someone would put up a slide with 10 different experiments worth of data, I would just start wandering around trying to take it all in and trying to understand the whole thing rather than the little sub figure that they were trying to get us to focus on. And so that was a big thing for me, was realizing that when at least when I make a presentation, both for YouTube and for in person, that each slide just needs to have one single concept on it and one single thing, and not have like 10 different things. Focus people's attention by just showing them what to focus on and nothing else.
But you do more than YouTube, Josh. You also do podcasting, which can be a very different animal from YouTube altogether. Yeah. In January, you started the Human Stories in AI, and we'd like to know, what lessons or insights have you learned from podcasting?
I've learned that you guys are actually very good at podcasting. You guys are
keep failing forward.
You guys are, I'm just doing this right now. I'm like, I need to change everything I'm doing. No, you guys are, I have a much greater appreciation for what it takes to do a good podcast. And what I'm seeing right now is like a textbook example of how it should be done. I should have you on my podcast so you can see everything that's wrong. But I've learned a lot of things with the podcast. One thing that you guys are doing that's great is you just let me ramble. That's what I've learned is if I can let my guests tell their own story without me interrupting them too much, what comes out of their mouth is fascinating, and I love it. And so it's just sort of like, to me, the goal is to provide an environment that's comfortable enough that they feel like they can talk about anything. And that's something and when they do, I learn something every time. Like in the most recent episode, I had this guy, Brian Risk, on, and he was talking about, what should we do now that there's AI? And he had this incredible analogy that really blew my mind. He said, it used to be all we had was the shovel, and anyone could dig a hole. You just take a shovel and you just start digging a hole. But then someone invented a steam shovel, and it took some training. You had to learn how to use a steam shovel. You couldn't just walk up to a steam shovel and use it. You had to practice with it, maybe get certified. But once you learn how to use a steam shovel, you could dig some serious ditches. And as a result of the new technology, you'd be in demand, and also as a result of the new technology, we could do things we couldn't do before. We could build skyscrapers. We could dig, subways. The new technology opened up new opportunities, and we built new cool things. And he goes, and that's the way I see sort of the AI tools that we have today. It's the new steam shovel, and that my advice to everyone is to learn how to use them, and take them seriously, because they're not gonna take away. I mean, there may be a shift in jobs, just like there's a shift in how people build buildings and things like that. But we're going to be, he's like, just imagine, if we didn't have the technology to build a skyscraper, what would New York look like? Right. It'd be completely different. And he's like, and just imagine sort of the kind of cool things that could come from, more people being able to use these tools that can help them do what the steam shovel helped people do. And when I just heard that story, and I was like, holy smokes, this is amazing. And I've heard lots of stories like that from my guests. And what I love is I get guests from different, I try to get them from different fields. And it's really interesting to hear what people are doing in each field and how they're doing it. I don't know. You give me an opportunity to learn, and I'll be there. I love it.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for your time. I've learned a lot today, and you're a champion of learning. And this is your time. What episodes, podcasts, or videos or events coming out do you want to make sure that the audience is aware of?
Well, the podcast comes out every 2 weeks, so check that out. I have a really exciting video that I'm working on right now on how to code a ChatGPT style transformer, step by step. I'm really excited about that. I'm hoping that'll come out by the end of May. And I'm also really excited that I'm going to possibly get to travel to India in August. I may go to Bangalore. At least that's the plan right now. And I've never been to Bangalore before. I've been to India, but I've never been to Bangalore. And I cannot wait to go. And I'm really excited about that.
So look for Josh on his world tour.
Yeah.
Coming to a city near you, we hope.
Yes.
Josh, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you very much. It's just been great.
Sven Polders import Josh Starmer.
In statistics and machine learning, when you take the log, you use base E. In statistics and machine learning, when you take the log, you use base E. When you take the log, you use log base E. Base E is for you and for me. You can use it with the log function and you'll see the math will work out and you'll feel ecstasy. That's the thing that I love when I use base E. Log base E. Yeah, E. It's approximately 2.72. In statistics and machine learning, when you take the log, you use base E. In statistics and machine learning, when you take the log, you use base E. When you use, when you take the log, you use log base E. work out the way mine do, so don't complain.